Hey guys, welcome back. Joe Brunsman, insurance broker to the stars here. And today we're talking about the Battle of the Bytes. Will your policy cover cyber war? Now, if you're a business out there and you have a cyber policy, you're definitely going to want to know about this because the answer is it depends. And if you're an MSP out there watching this, well, if your clients don't have coverage and they've suffered a big loss, obviously they could come on after you. All right? Now, why am I talking about this now? I saw this article here, and it talks about the three biggest concerns for the cyber insurance industry this year. So cybercrime, no surprise. AI, no surprise. Much less combining AI and cybercrime. That's going to be a nightmare that I'll probably talk about on a different video. But the third one is war. Now, at my level of insurance, I'm not saying we're a bunch of intellectual heavy hitters, but at the very top echelons of the insurance industry, you have some really smart people. So if they're worried about it, definitely something I think you guys should be worried about as well. Now, why is this important that you know this? I pulled this from Understanding Insurance Law 6th edition. This should add some clarity to all you folks out there that are frustrated with your insurance people. Here you go. The default rule is that agents and brokers have no duty to advise insureds about the adequacy or appropriateness of the insurance coverage they purchase or about optional coverage that might be available, right? And then it goes on to say, hey, just because they sold you something doesn't mean that they're an insurance advisor. As a matter of fact, in some states, that could actually fall under a different type of license. Ergo, if you're not reading your policy, maybe your insurance guy hasn't read it, probably doesn't understand it, specifically when it comes to cyber. Now you could have some problems that you're not even forecasting. So, important that you know this information. Right now, let's rewind back to 2017. NotPetya, everybody generally knows what happens there and kind of all the kerfuffle that came about because of the big insurance claims where the insurance industry tried to deny coverage. Now, a little bit of inside baseball here. I actually have a buddy from the Naval Academy, and he was part of the National Security Council when this came out. And he said, hey, man, we had no idea that this thing was going down like this. Insurance never even crossed our minds. So obviously they're working with a lot of moving parts there, right? I'm not trying to besmirch those guys. I think they're probably trying to do the best they can. But the insurance industry lost ultimately a lot of money because of this. So, little refresher here. Allegedly came from Russia. I'm not going to jump into that one. You got about $3 billion worth of insurance claims, likely even more than that. And then you had this famous case of Merck versus like every insurance company in the world, pretty much, all the major ones. You had Mondelez v. Zurich. A whole bunch of cases came out of this. Now, the cyber industry was saying, hey, we think cyber war falls under this hostile warlike action exclusion. And of course, the insurance industry lost that because the courts, I think rightfully said here, nobody thought that's what it meant when you issue that policy and when you bargain for terms. So what happened? Well, the insurance industry goes, holy geez, we better figure out a way to start excluding this because, to be fair, how could you actually forecast what the potential losses would be or the probability of this happening? Now, obviously, they're worried about it with all the goings on in the world, but they don't know what the probability is and they don't know how big of a deal that could be. So they don't want to bankrupt their own insurance companies trying to cover a cyber warfare type issue. Now, obviously, for you, if you're a policyholder, if you're an MSP and you have policyholders, that kind of presents a problem because there's yet another exclusion being added to these policies. There's different types. We're going to go through that could directly impact, frankly, how your business operates in the future. And for you policyholders out there, if you have a business following a cyber attack. All right, so what does all this stuff look like? Now, once again, 30,000 foot view, LMA, they came out with this, these Lloyd's exclusions. Even they said they didn't really do the best job rolling these things out, and there's a lot of bad information out there. So there are now 8 different versions. I'm not going to go through all 8. Really, the biggest difference between, you'll see there's A version and B version of 4 different types. All right. So B versions don't have an agreement on how the cyber operation is attributed to a state. That obviously impacts how the exclusion is handled. So probably anybody getting the B type version, they're going to be a much bigger company. I'd say, hey, work with legal counsel, an insurance guy that specializes in this stuff to iron that out, because that's going to be important. All right. Now, I should back up here. Why do you care if Lloyd's of London is putting these things out? Well, there's a bunch of big insurance companies that I believe are Lloyd syndicates in the cyber market here within the U.S. So companies like Hiscox, I believe, is a Lloyd syndicate. Beasley is a Lloyd syndicate. I think CFC is also a Lloyd syndicate. Coalition might also be. Anyways, check your own paper. But just because they're in London doesn't mean it's not impacting the U.S. market here. Now, what do they all roughly contain? 1, exclude losses from war, whether declared or not. Obviously, cyber war, not necessarily a declared war. 2, exclude losses from country-backed cyber attacks that A, significantly impact the ability of a country to function, or B, significantly impair the security capabilities of a country. Number 3, clarify whether they're excluding computer systems located outside the impacted state. So that's important. Let's say, 2 random countries, Madagascar and, South Korea, get into a kerfuffle, and there's cyber war going off between the 2 of them, and you're just in some other random country. But that malicious code happens to impact your system. You're going to want to know if you're going to have coverage for that, obviously, before the event occurs. 4, create a method to agree on attribution. And then 5, define their terms, which, spoiler alert again, they did a terrible job in that regard. All right. Now, let's go back to just about a month ago, this Change Healthcare Optum event. You're going to want to keep this in mind because it's very, very important. So February 21st, they had this cybersecurity issue. They came out via their 8K filing because they're an SEC registrant, and they said, hey, we suspect a nation-state associated cybersecurity threat actor is to blame. Now, I believe since that point, it has been confirmed that it was Black Hat, but at the time, it was just assumed to be Black Hat. So now we have to go, okay, well, the federal government here in the U.S. has come out and said, well, Black Hat is effectively just kind of like an extension within Russia of their government. And so that's why you have Change Healthcare here saying, hey, a nation-state associated cybersecurity threat actor. Now, let's go ahead and hop in to some of these exclusions, keeping Change Healthcare Optum in mind here. Now, the first one, 64A, just excludes all state-sponsored cyber attacks. Just point blank, that's all you got. Now, attribution, you're going to want to keep this point in mind. This may include formal or official attribution by the government of the state, like that, who was it? The press secretary, whoever, for NotPetya that I put out before, in which the computer system affected by the cyber operation is physically located to another state. So they're saying, hey, the government that got impacted by this, they can come out, give formal or official attribution to say, hey, it was this other bad guy. But then it also adds, or those acting at its direction or under its control. So let's go back to Optum. Is Black Hat acting under the direction or the control of the Russian state? I will leave that to much smarter intelligence minds. But if you were a pharmacist and you had a cyber policy because you were forward-leaning, and then you go, hey, well, thank God I have a cyber policy, maybe you're not going to have coverage for that type of event. And then let's say the pharmacy is losing a lot of money. What are they going to do? They might try to go after their MSP just to recoup all those losses. There's been plenty of reports already talking about how they've had to furlough people, how they're looking at laying people off, potentially shutting the doors down at some of these pharmacies, to the point where I believe Change Healthcare came out with like this loan process to try and keep all these guys afloat. So it's a really big deal. Next, 65A excludes state-sponsored attacks that cause a state to become an impacted state. So before, it was just, hey, no coverage for any cyber war type issues. This one is an impacted state. Now, what does that mean? An impacted state, it's where it creates a major detrimental impact on an essential service or the security defense of that state. Now, what's a major detrimental impact as opposed to a nominal detrimental impact? I don't know. It's probably going to be litigated. Now, what's an essential service? Anything vital to the function of a state, such as financial institutions, financial market infrastructure, health services, or utility services. All right? So if there's a major detrimental impact on any of those, they're going to say, hey, we exclude that because it's now an impacted state. So if you're an MSP out there and you have clients in financial institutions, financial market infrastructure, health services, utility services, you're going to want to take a look. Next, allows you to adjust or limit the exclusions for specific loss limits that may be specified. So obviously, you're going to need a risk assessment to do that. You're really going to want a lot more eyes looking at that problem than just, hey, CFO, go to the insurance guy, buy a cyber policy. You're going to need more to it than that. So obviously, you get specialized counsel. Next, let's talk about attribution here on this same exclusion. Now, primarily, but not exclusive, it's whether the government of the impacted state provides attribution. Or, waiting for that government attribution, the insurer may rely upon inference, which is objectively reasonable. So they go on to say, hey, best case scenario, we're gonna put a pause on those payments until we figure this out. What's the moral of the story there? Do everything you reasonably can to increase your cybersecurity posture. All right? Do everything you can because you don't want to get hemmed up on this. So let's go back to the Optum event. All right? Well, in that Optum event, they're saying, hey, we think this came from Black Hat and we think it's a state-sponsored or associated cyber hacking group. All right? Well, could an insurer say, yeah, we think that's objectively reasonable, and so we're going to go ahead and put a pause on this at best until maybe we have some more official guidance from the government, which may or may not ever come, quite frankly. So it does say after the government does or does not, after the government does not or cannot declare attribution, the insurer shall prove attribution by reference to other such available evidence. Now, what does that mean? What is other such available evidence? I have no idea. I don't know what that is. Once again, that's probably going to be subject of litigation, would be my guess. Now, let's move on to 66. This seems to have the most extensive exclusionary language, doesn't cover losses related to impacted states, and does not make any exceptions to this exclusion. All right? So if you're an impacted state, you're gone. Attribution, once again, if a government attributes it to a state or someone acting under its direction or control, same essential services language. And now moving on to 67. Now, allegedly, from what I have heard from the Lloyd's folks that put these exclusions out, this is supposed to be the most common one. Now, whether that's true or not, I can't vouch for that whatsoever. But there's no exclusion for losses if the insured, and MSPs pay attention, or its third-party service providers are not physically located in the impacted state, but are affected by a cyber operation. All right? So now we have to start thinking, all right, we're pulling in third-party service providers. What does that mean? If we go back to those other exclusions, they didn't even mention it, right? So there's a serious distinction there. And now we're kind of talking about some spillover losses. So once again, same attribution definition, same essential services definition, right? But now we have to start thinking about spillover losses. So once again, if you're located in Madagascar and you happen to get hit by some strain that is allegedly, let's say, from Russia that is going to South Korea, right? Well, if you're not physically located in the impacted state, then you might have coverage for that. So once again, you got to start thinking about third-party risk management and supply chain implications. All right, so what's this whole impact on third-party service providers, right? If you're an MSP, if you're like an IT consultant, like what does this actually mean? So once again, no exclusion for losses if the insured or its third-party service providers are not physically located in that impacted state, right? The other exclusions that I referenced, there's no mention of third-party service providers. So what do we actually think that means? I think it means there's probably going to be a lot of litigation if some organization is impacted through their MSP. That could get kind of dicey. So now let's start talking about how would like fourth party providers be part of this. So let's say you're an MSP within your stack, one of your providers that you utilize to provide services to your clients, they are impacted, right? How does that shake out? I don't know, quite frankly. So once again, I think it's probably going to be subject to litigation if this ever gets triggered. All right, now to kind of wrap this up because I've been yapping too much here. What can you actually do about this? All right. First of all, if you're a business and you're buying a cyber policy, you can try and negotiate those terms. Of course, first you have to read your policy. So please make sure you understand, hey, does my policy come from a Lloyd syndicate? If so, what type of exclusion are they putting on this policy? Next, just pragmatically, most SMBs are not going to be able to negotiate those terms, which means in that case, you're going to have to seek alternative quotes elsewhere. Now, if you're going to go out and seek alternative quotes, let's imagine you get the most restrictive cyber war exclusion on your renewal and you go, hey, we cannot have this. We need, let's say, spillover coverage. We're going to need coverage for third-party service providers, etc. Now I want to go seek alternative quotes. What does that mean to you? That means I really hope you have your security in order before you go out and you start shopping. All right. You're going back to the open market. So, hey, maybe you were with a very lenient insurer. Now you're going to the open market and they may be a lot more strict on you and demand a lot more stuff. Obviously, you don't want to do that when you have 7 days until renewal and suddenly you find out you have to implement like 5 different additional cybersecurity controls to get the coverage that you're looking for. So the easy answer there is go to your MSP, talk to your IT folks, get the best possible security that you can reasonably afford, and then go out to the market. Once again, there were a bunch of times in this video where I said, hey, I just don't know what that means. So the best example of that was a major detrimental impact. It just lacks clarity. I don't know what that means. Now, if you're a larger organization and I'm already dealing with this, what happens if you have different cyber war exclusions in different towers of your insurance? That could get really messy really fast. And I sincerely hope that you have good counsel and a good insurance guy to assist you with that, because that could get really dicey. So you want to make sure that, hey, if you have, let's say, a primary policy and then like 2 or 3 excess policies on top of it, that you're going to understand, hey, how could the various cyber war exclusions actually interact with each other if a claim starts getting bigger and starts eroding through that tower of insurance? Once again, just minimize your odds of losing the game, which means what? Hey, do everything you can to increase your cybersecurity. Now, I will say my grandfather Very smart man, hardworking guy. Often told me very profound things when I was a kid that I didn't pay attention to until later in life. But one time he asked me, he goes, Joe, how can you tell if somebody's telling you the truth? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just a kid. And he goes, if it's against their direct financial benefit to tell you to do something and they're telling you anyways, you need to pay attention to that. Now, why do I bring that up? I'm telling you, hey, increase your cybersecurity. Go out to your MSP guys. Say, hey, put together a wish list. What's the biggest bang for the buck? And start implementing those controls. That will directly lower the cost of your insurance, make you a better risk, make you less likely to fall victim to a cyber event, which means ultimately I would make less money. So what I'm telling you is it's against my best financial interest to tell you to increase your security. I'm still telling you to do it. There's absolutely a reason for that. All right, moving forward. Assess your own risk. Please talk to your MSP, your IT providers. Try and get a risk assessment here. Certain industries, such as critical infrastructure, some of those other industries we laid out, you better be hyper vigilant in this area because you are absolutely a target. Different policies from different insurers are going to have entirely different language. So we have not seen yet, at least come across my desk, any U.S. insurers that are kind of piggybacking at this point on those cyber warfare exclusions. But if you're a policyholder, you probably have no idea who your cyber insurer actually is and what that underlying paper is. So now's probably a pretty good time to take a look at that. Next, if you really want to, please go read the boilerplate. I was just given kind of the general idea here. But I still urge you go out, actually read those specimen exclusionary forms for yourself to get a better handle on what this stuff is. And then, of course, it's going to get messy. I could foresee if these are ever triggered, there could be a lot of litigation that could just pile on for years. So you don't want to get blindsided by something like that. All right. So when in doubt, seek legal counsel. That's all I got for you guys. Stay safe.